To be honest, classroom management didn't always come easy to me. In fact, I was told that I had the worst behaved class in the school. Along my journey, I've been told that I'm too nice, that I'm too young, that I'm too kind, and my students would just never take me seriously. Fast forward to today, and I've been asked to help substitutes in my district on classroom management, and I even have programs where I help new and first year teachers around the world with their classroom management. So you might be wondering what's changed. Well, today I'm going to dive into the three mindset shifts I changed to have a great classroom management experience. So with that being said, let's dive in.
Hey teacher bestie, my name's Helena and I'm the creator of the Present Teacher Podcast. I'm a first year teacher coach, and in this podcast you are going to learn everything from simple, actionable classroom management, social emotional learning, and teacher wellness strategies. You know that impact you want to make in the classroom? Well, we're going to make it happen here.
One of the first mindset shifts I had to make as a new teacher when it came to my classroom management was going from reacting to disruptive behavior in class to being proactive and preventing the disruptive behavior from happening in the first place. So, a great example of this is actually an excerpt from my new book coming out in 2025, and I'm going to read part of it to you. So I sat at my desk with my head in my hands. I had just finished off a really hard day with my students. The reason I felt like I was so busy getting my students on task that I didn't actually get to teach anything. I had tried literally everything. This was a hard class. The pre-K teachers met me in the hallway one day before school started with a raised eyebrow and a sarcastic good luck with this class, and we tried our best. The morning started like it usually did. Students were out of their seats, playing and goofing off instead of working. I gave them many reminders, thanked the students who were following directions, had us take breaks, put our heads down, gave us minutes for a timeout, gave stickers to those who were following directions, and even had several students clip up for their positive behavior. But none of it was working. My students were still off task all day, and I knew they would fail tomorrow's math test because of it. I felt like a failure. How am I supposed to teach kids when I can't even get them to focus long enough to learn anything? End quote. Again, this is an excerpt from my upcoming book, and you can get on the wait list to be notified when that book comes out in the description. But as I was saying, does my story sound familiar? It's so easy to be constantly worried about having to stop your lesson and to address behavior, and it feels like you're not actually teaching because you're so busy addressing behavior. And it feels like a wild game of whack-a-mole. I often ended up getting snappy because I would get triggered by my students' behavior. I had tried everything to fix the behavior that was happening in class, but none of it was working. And it wasn't until I realized good teachers prevent a lot of disruptive behavior from happening in the first place. You see, veteran teachers have clear expectations, they have clear procedures, and they have consistent consequences in place that prevents most students from disrupting class. So, during this time period, I stopped obsessing on how I responded to disruptive behavior with incentives and instead focused more on the foundations. And I'm going to walk more on about this and all the steps you can take in future videos and content. But essentially, some of the things you need to focus on, or what I focused on, I should say, instead of responding to disruptive behavior, were things like classroom expectations, classroom procedures, rules, logical consequences, levels of proactive action. These are all the things that I started really focusing on, and that's when I started to see a change. So, making that shift of I'm not going to spend all my energy in responding to disruptive behavior. Instead, I'm going to get to the root cause and prevent a majority of it from happening is a huge mindset shift I took that shifted me from that new teacher mindset to that experienced teacher mindset. The second biggest mindset shift I had to make in order to transform my classroom management was being the definition of society's good teacher and being my own version of what a good teacher is. So when I started teaching, the way I run my classroom Honestly, the way around my classroom looks like many teachers, but if you were to go into my classroom now, it doesn't look remotely like any other teachers in my building, and that's okay. You see, back in the day when I started, most teachers were using clip charts, call students out on their behavior in front of the whole class, were expected to sit still for long periods of time without talking, and were belittled for the disruptive behavior. And one thing that I was always told when I was student teaching is we're not supposed to be nice. Don't be nice until December. And I tried all that and it didn't work for me. I felt snappy. I felt frustrated because I would try these things and I would still have the disruptive behavior going on in my classroom. And so, what I ended up doing, or what I ended up wanting instead, is I wanted to have fun. I wanted to be engaging. I wanted to have my kids up and moving a ton. I wanted to pull students to the side to discuss privately the disruptive behavior that was happening in class instead of calling them out on their behavior in front of the whole classroom. I wanted to have strong relationships while still being firm in my boundaries. I wanted to be seen as the adult and the teacher and the leader, but still show mutual respect to my students. I wanted to prevent most disruptive behavior from happening. I wanted to rip up those dang clip charts. I wanted to show my students the mutual respect I expected from them. And I wanted to let them talk to each other. And my voice level in my classroom, I love it when it's at like a whisper all day, or a little louder than that, but where students can just talk about what they're learning about because I think it's so important. And I want to have them run the classroom for me. I want to be able to pull students back for small groups and let them run the classroom without me so I don't have to worry about pausing what I'm doing to help the class. So that was what I wanted, but that's not what the ideal or good teacher looks like in the day and age when I started teaching. And for a long time, I tried to be society's definition of a good teacher, but it didn't work. I'd get frustrated. I felt like my identity as a teacher was under attack every time a student was disruptive. I felt like it was a personal attack on who I was and my value as a teacher. And I would wonder why all these strategies I was trying had worked for all those teachers across the hallway, but they didn't work for me. And it wasn't until I got clear on what my definition of a good teacher was that I really started to see that shift and I started choosing strategies that were aligned to the teacher I wanted to be. And I dared to step out and be my own version of a good teacher instead of society's version of a good teacher. So here's how you get there. If no one could be mad at you, ask yourself these questions. If no one could be mad at you and anything you did was guaranteed to work, how would you run your classroom? What would it look like? What would it feel like? What would it sound like if I were to come in? What would be happening right now? And then once you answer this question, start going for strategies that align with that kind of teacher, not society's definition of a good teacher, but your definition of a good teacher. And what you're going to find is those strategies are just going to run so much more smoothly for you because they are aligned with you as opposed to doing what society considers the norm and good teaching. So, making that shift and really deciding, I had a turning point where I saw a teacher who on YouTube, she was doing strategies that were unlike anything I had ever seen. And based off of that video, I started going off and making my own strategies. I started taking inspiration from others and tweaking it to my own definition of a good teacher. And that's when things started to run smoothly for me. So, the second biggest mindset shift I had to make in order to be a good teacher was, or to be good at classroom management, was I let go of society's definition of a good teacher and I leaned into my own truth and my own definition of what a good teacher is. The third biggest mindset shift I had to make in order to be a good teacher was I went from using band-aid strategies to long-term strategies. So before I knew any better, I thought that classroom management was giving rewards, giving prizes, praising students, and calling them out when they weren't following expectations. My classroom management toolbox was full of a lot of what I like to call band-aid strategies. These are short-term strategies that are there to affirm if a student is on the right path or not and align to the classroom expectations. But they're not long-term solutions. These things are examples of what I like to call band-aid strategies. Things like clip charts, class rewards, desk pets, secret students, sticker charts, student bucks, class parties. All these things are what I like to call band-aid strategies. They're the things you're gonna find on social media and you're gonna try them and they might work for a day and then you're gonna get frustrated that they're not working for longer than a day and then you go to the next strategy and you try them for a day and then they don't work. They're band-aid strategies because they're not actually addressing the behavior. They're just there to reaffirm if your students are doing what they're supposed to or not. But the part I was missing was how do I expect my students to follow the expectations in class when they don't know what they are? When they don't know what they are. They were clear to me, clear as day. It seemed common sense to me. But then I started to realize just because it's clear to me doesn't mean it's clear to my students. And just because in my head I have this classroom running a certain way, I haven't articulated that to my students. And the reality is they have different programming. They have been running the classroom or navigating the classroom in the different parameters that my coworkers have given them, that their past teachers have given them. We're all different. We all have different learning styles. We all have different ways of running our classroom. We have different voice levels that we have and expect students to work at. We have different ways we expect our students to line up. It's just not the same. One teacher might expect an absolute level zero. One teacher might be okay with whispering. It's all different, and no wonder our students are being disruptive when I wasn't getting to the foundations. So, we're gonna dive into that. But when I stopped looking at the band-aid strategies and I started shifting into these other strategies I'm about to talk about, everything completely changed because I wasn't using a band-aid to try to prevent the injury from happening in the first place. I was just preventing the situation from happening in the first place. So instead of band-aid strategies, I would use these strategies, these band-aid strategies, as like icing on a cake. I'm not going to use it as the plate or even the contents to make my actual cake. It's the things I'm going to use to affirm to my students, hey, good job, you're following expectations, or hey, as a class, we need to work on this. Let's work on this. Let's have a goal to get in line at level zero, do it so many times we are in a class party or whatever, if that's what I decide I want to do. But instead of using these band-aid strategies to make a cake, I actually relied on long-term classroom management strategies to build the foundation of my actual cake. So long-term strategies, they are the things that are going to actually form habits because classroom management is honestly, in my mind, how you expect your students to behave habitually. It's habits. It's building habits on how you want your classroom to run. And when you have your students do it so consistently that it becomes a habit and they don't have to think about it, and it's automated like brushing your teeth or brushing your hair every morning, they don't have to think about it. They're not constantly thinking, oh, remember I have to walk at a level zero. They're just naturally doing it at this point. And that's where you get the automated classroom. That's where you get where you can sit back and work with the student one-on-one and not worry about what your students are doing because they're on task because they've done it so much at this point. So, they're the long-term strategies that are going to form habits, like we talked about, on how you want your classroom to run. So, here are some examples. And if you haven't yet, make sure to check out all the content I have wherever you're tuning in because I have over 22 now different pieces of content on classroom management, whether that's my podcast, my YouTube channel, wherever you're tuning in, I have a ton. And I actually dive into these different aspects a little bit So make sure to search through and find how, if you want to learn how I run these specific strategies I'm going to tell you in a minute, because I'm sure I've covered it. And if I haven't yet, I plan to in the next couple months. So here we go. Classroom procedures, classroom rules, logical consequences, class expectations, and levels of proactive managing. By that, I mean, how are you instantly responding to student disruptive behavior before you even pull them out to the hallway to have that discussion, before you even call home? What are you doing in the meantime? I have a step-by-step process I use for that. So make sure to tune in for that if you can't see the content yet in those places I mentioned earlier. So, as a wrap up, there were some major, and I mean major, mindset shifts I needed to make in order to have the classroom management skills that I have today. As an overview, first thing that we talked about, the biggest mindset shift, number one, was reacting versus being proactive and preventing disruptive behavior. As a new teacher, I was constantly in the reactive mode on how I'm going to respond to students. As an experienced teacher, I went to how can I prevent a majority of disruptive behavior from happening in the first place, and how can I do that consistently so my students do it without me having to remind them and they don't have to think about it. The second biggest mindset shift I had to take was taking society's good teacher versus my definition of a good teacher. I let go a lot of the strategies I was taught as a new teacher, as a student teacher from my peers, not because I think they're bad. They have their ways of running their classroom, and that's totally fine. It just was not aligned to me and how I wanted my classroom to run. So I took it, I tweaked it, I made it my own, and that's all teaching is. So letting go of society's definition of what a good teacher looked like and getting crystal clear. What does a good teacher look like to me? What does good classroom management look like to me? What does an ideal classroom look and feel like day to day for me? Is it at a zero? Is it whispering? Are people working independently? Are people working in groups? What does that look like? Get clear on that. Choose strategies from there. The third thing is I went from using band-aid strategies for my classroom management to long-term systems. I'm gonna be honest, these long-term systems, they're not that sexy. They're not that like they're not the things that are like the dazzling things that are gonna get you a ton of likes on social media, but they work. When you go back to the foundations, you can then add these fun classroom management strategies as icing on a cake if you want to, but they shouldn't be your whole classroom management plan. So, here are some next steps if you want to continue this conversation on classroom management. First off, I've been asked a ton of questions on classroom management. And instead of answering the same 10 questions over and over again, I created a classroom management guide. So the classroom management guide is all the top 10 questions I get asked about classroom management. I created, YouTube, podcast, blog post episodes on it, and I put it in a guide, links in a guide. So things like how to deal with a chatty class, what to do when students are being respectful to you, how to get your students to line up, all these things I put into one. Which procedure should I be teaching? All of that I put into one guide. So make sure to check that out in the description down below so you can grab it. It's free, my gift to you. I want a free resource for all the teachers in the world who want quick answers. And honestly, it would take me a while to DM all of you back and email all of you back. So my gift to you, I hope you find it helpful. Second thing is I have a free 3-day classroom management event happening at the end of this month where I'm diving deeper into strategies I actually focus on for classroom management. So make sure to check out that 3 live day event because it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, it's free. You can get access to the replays if you're watching this after that time period is up. So even if it's been a while since this content's come out, make sure to check out the description because you will get access to the replay. Third thing, I realize that as a teacher, I really wish a teacher just said, here is all my classroom management stuff and a gift tied with a bow. And so what I did is I ended up doing that. I literally put all of my things like my classroom jobs, classroom procedure slides, my secret student, like everything I use in my classroom. I made it into like 5 or 6 different themes because I don't know about you, but sometimes I would see a really good thing for classroom management or something, but it didn't really match my theme. I'm a theme girly. I'm a teacher from elementary. You can blame that. So I made 5 different themes, all the resources put in a bundle. So if you want to check out that bundle, make sure to check out the description down below. You can, even if you go through just to see what's in there and get inspiration for your own ideas, or maybe there's specific things in that bundle you specifically want just that thing, make sure to check out the description because, like I said, everything, everything classroom management I possibly need, I put together in a bow and set it out to the world like here. Whoever needs this, it's there for you. Even if you take it as inspiration, I highly recommend you check it out because it's a great starting point to see what's going on in my classroom and to see what other teachers I'm coaching with are using in their classrooms. All right. So that wraps up the top 3 biggest classroom management shifts I've had to make in order to go from struggling with behaviors to creating a classroom that honestly just runs on its own and I absolutely love. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, teacher bestie. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope that you were able to take away some value that will help you thrive inside and out of the classroom. It would mean the world to me if you could take 5 seconds right now and leave a review on this podcast. And if you found this podcast especially helpful, make sure to take a screenshot of this episode right now and tag me on your socials to let me know you're listening. As always, remember that we are stronger together with all the love in the world. Helena, aka the President Teacher. See you next time, teacher bestie.